Welcome to Life Beyond Abortion, the podcast where we delve into the untold stories and experiences surrounding abortion. Stories often missing from everyday conversations, media reports, and even other podcast interviews. I'm your host, Melissa Ohden, the founder and CEO of the Abortion Survivors Network. As the author of You Carried Me, A Daughter's Memoir, and Abortion Survivors Break Their Silence, I've had the privilege of hearing the most powerful stories from some of the most resilient and courageous individuals. These stories and these people have profoundly transformed my life, and I believe they have the power to transform yours as well. Together, we will amplify these voices, share the truths that they illuminate, and challenge our culture to recognize what life is truly like beyond abortion. Well, I am thrilled to be having this conversation with both a professional colleague and a dear friend of mine, Kylee Heap from Support After Abortion. Kylee, thank you for joining me on Life Beyond Abortion.
Thank you so much for having me, Melissa.
I mean, we could have a lot of conversation about food and travel and cats and all the things, but that's not what we're going to talk about
Musicals.
today. Musicals, yes.
Yes.
By the way, I am taking the girls to see The Lion King in Kansas City. They are super excited about it. But that's a different conversation. But I think what I want to talk about really is not only support after abortion, but I would love to talk about your experience and how you got involved in the pro-life movement, how you got involved with support after abortion, because these may seem like small details to you, but I like people to see the big picture, which is everybody has a story. Everybody gets called to be involved in different ways. And I think we all have our own questions and doubts about our abilities and how we're called to serve. But I think we get blessed in such a big way when we take a leap of faith. So all that to say, I'm going to let you start where you want to start. Like, where does Kylee involved in support after abortion actually really begin?
Well, it began with a yes. I had a major transition occur during COVID, along with the rest of the world, right? That my job was in a holding pattern because I had been working in pharmaceutical research, and a lot of my clinical trials that I was involved in were in a holding pattern. The world just didn't know what the next steps looked like, and it wasn't quite safe for our patients to come in and receive their care. So I began exploring other options. And when I did that, it was really scary, actually, Melissa, because I had been working in research for 18 years. And so when it was placed on my heart to start exploring other things, what I did was to start consulting. And so I translated my experience in global operations and marketing and launching brands into the global market to really serve people who wanted to have some expertise in marketing or communications or operational management and other executive leadership functions. And so I became exposed to many organizations within the pro-life movement, including yours. That's where our friendship began, which has blessed me so much. And as I became more and more aware, it was almost like discovering a quilt, that I had seen the pro-life movement as being this singular focus of saving a baby and standing outside of an abortion clinic and praying. And when I became aware of this quilt work of organizations that were standing within the gaps of survivors of abortion and people who were considering adoption and pregnancy centers whose mantra was saying yes, and people who were serving disenfranchised groups of people, including men after abortion, I just felt like it was an awakening that this was such a diverse group of people, and I began exploring a relationship with support after abortion. And I was really drawn to them because they had just recently completed 4 different research projects. And so, research, of course, spoke to my heart because I had just spent 18 years in pharmaceutical research. So, it made sense to me to be naturally attracted to these people who were talking about abortion healing and were trying to discover whether all the needs of all the people were being met in the abortion healing space. And so that created a conversation, and I sat down with the founder of the organization. She shared with me some insights from the research and sent me a binder. It was this big, Melissa, and it had every question and every answer sliced and diced in every way you could have imagined. And she just challenged me to recognize that while I had not experienced an abortion, that I could bring the grief experiences of my life to serve people who were having grief experiences of abortion in their life. It never dawned on me. You know, we talk about imposter syndrome, and it never dawned on me that my grief could pay forward to somebody with a different experience of grief. And I think I was kind of overcomplicating it in that way. And I remember one of the first experiences I had with support after abortion. I don't know where everyone was, but somehow I ended up being the person that answered the after abortion line. I think I sweat through my shirt that day, Melissa, because when I answered the phone, I was so worried that I would say the wrong thing and I would be the wrong person and I would not be enough. And I began that conversation by saying to somebody who is expressing grief, I am so sorry for your loss. And then we just were quiet for a moment, and I could heal this exhale. I exhaled. I had not breathed in at that point, right? And it was so uncomplicated. It was just loving someone and seeing them and knowing what it feels like to wake up without that person in your life and be there and connect them to the healing that they deserve and that they are willing to walk forward into.
And I hope that people are really listening to this piece intently, because I mean there's a few nuggets of wisdom, and one of them is something I've been talking about recently to students at high schools. It's just sort of that time of year where I'm at a lot of high schools and I love it. But one of the things I've said to students recently is, well, and even adults, but you know, the answer is really simple when you get down to the brass tacks of supporting people in any area of their life, but especially when it comes to abortion, which is listen. Listen to someone, be willing to say, I'm sorry for your loss, right? As we're grappling for the words and going, oh Lord, what do I say? No, it's actually really simple. I am sorry for your loss. And then close your lips and listen to what they have to say, because there can be a very awkward long pause, can't there? And you're like, oh my gosh, should I say something? Not yet. Right? Just let it sit, because what I find, and maybe Kylee, you have a different experience and that's okay. But my experience tends to be that after I say that, people sort of go, right? You can sort of like physically see them going, huh. And then people have actually said to me, you were the first person who has ever acknowledged my loss. And to
That's
me,
exactly been
that
my
speaks
experience.
volumes about abortion healing. And yes, how much great work has been done historically in the pro-life movement. And I'd love for you to share with folks some of those organizations who have historically been doing that work. But I think it also reminds us that in spite of how much great work has been done, there has been a really big gap. And support after abortion is helping to not only fill that, but shape what that can look like going forward.
Certainly. I don't know if you knew this, but Support After Abortion was born in a regional meeting of intersecting agencies. And by that I mean homeless shelters, sex trafficking shelters, rape crisis shelters, the intersections of addiction and poverty. And these leaders came together in this region in Florida and they said, there's no one stop shop. There's no one place where we can create a referral for this thing that we don't do. We don't do abortion grief. And we just don't know where to send them. And so with that, we determined that we would become kind of like a central agency, a 211, if you will. And what we needed to do was to learn what kind of programs existed in the market. And so we contacted over 1,500 abortion healing programs, learned about their processes and their capacity and what their programming looked like and who it might be appropriate for. And then there was this moment where we're like, okay, so now we understand who is serving. Is that what is needed? That's what sparked the desire for research. And that's when we learned that about 95% of the programming that exists in the country is serving a group of people who very much need their services, but that there's this gap for people who desire anonymity, for people who desire secular content, for people who are looking for clinical care or virtual access. And we realized that if we centralized the referral pathway and equipped diverse providers to offer healing in formats that clients want, that we weren't duplicating, we were actually scaling, because research was identifying that there were 22 million Americans who might desire healing but feel kind of invisible in the existing framework. And only 18% knew where to go for help.
22 million people potentially in need of healing, and only 18% knew where to go for help.
Situation, right? Because we think, gosh, it's so obvious. In any other situation, you would search on Google, you would ask a friend, etc. But this area of abortion grief, it has so many complicated traumas within it, and people don't seek help. They don't talk to their friend. They don't ask how somebody else received help because of the shame and the stigma, and quite frankly, a belief that maybe they aren't worthy of healing. And so there's a lot of barriers between the lack of awareness and poor access and fear of judgment, and just a misunderstanding. We use the word healing all the time, right, Melissa? But what does that actually mean? Mm-hmm. And there's this fear that healing is going to mean getting into the kind of that icky sticky, that I'm going to have to feel worse and I'm going to have to face things that I would rather just leave in a box somewhere. But we know that that's what's necessary to get to the other side of hope.
And I want to talk about the word grief for a moment because, obviously you and I as professionals and friends have walked this out together and, know how important language is. And I mean, that's one of those things that I love about Support After Abortion is you guys have used research to understand the scope of the problem and then lead efforts to fill gaps and serve more people in ways that work for them, right? Instead of trying to fit the square into the round hole, you guys are like, let's make a square for the squares and we can help make circles for the circles. But the language is so important. And I know you and I have talked about this as well. Sometimes we're sort of like those sticky wickets, right? Where people are like, man, they are a killjoy because we've used language for decades in the pro-life movement. And then these folks come along and they're encouraging us to use other language. And I mean, for me, that's about abortion survivors that Folks with very different experiences have used the term abortion survivor to describe their experience. And I have had to step into that space to say, man, I see you and what you've gone through in your abortion experience. And I have utter respect and care for you. But can I let you know that an abortion survivor is someone who survived an actual attempt to abort them? And so that has been a real language issue that we have been a part of at the Abortion Survivors Network. But at Support After Abortion, even the word abortion grief is something that maybe people have not heard about. So what does that mean? And why? Why that word?
It means so much to different people, and I want to begin just by commending everything that Abortion Survivors Network does to change language and make us more aware of what the impact is of our words. That's exactly the mission at Support After Abortion. We are trying to change the use of the word post-abortive to say an abortion experience or abortion experiences. And when we think about grief, it's complicated, right? Because people feel a lot of things that are at odds with each other, and we barely recognize that as a society. Somebody can come to me and say, I'm so relieved, but I'm not able to stop crying, and I can't get to my job because I feel so sad. And yet I'm relieved. And it's very difficult. It's very difficult for people to resolve these complicated emotions when they conflict with each other and to acknowledge both at the same time. And that's why we use a lot of mirroring language, just like you do, that we want to meet people where they're at. Not everyone has had an abortion experience that leads to grief or regret or shame. But some people have, and for those people, Support After Abortion is here.
What do you think? What do you think the experience has been for folks who hear the words grief for the first time? I mean, do you have an experience with someone who sort of went, "Oh wow, I never really thought about it that way"? And have you seen positive impacts, or have you guys sort of looked at research about language that would show people the impact of changing from saying post-abortive to abortion experience and talking about grief? How do we know that this works? There's my question.
There's your question. Yeah. When we see people's pain, it allows them to feel their pain and to walk through their pain. We had a client yesterday who is a man, and his girlfriend had an abortion at 14 weeks, and he actually had offered to quit his job, move and raise the child, and telling him and acknowledging his grief was the point in the conversation where I think we made that turn towards something that was releasing him from kind of shackles, if you will, for lack of a better word. We had a grandmother, her son was traumatized by envisioning his child being donated to science. He was very concerned about this, and it was a nightmare that he was experiencing. And so recognizing that little t trauma and recognizing the grief associated with loss not only validated her son, but also the grandmother. I think we as a society need to recognize that ripple effect of abortion extends beyond the mother and the father of the child who's been aborted into their family, friends, and loved ones who are also coping with that experience and have different words for it. Sometimes it's loss, sometimes it's grief, sometimes it's sadness, and sometimes it's shame, sometimes it's regret. There's just a web of feelings and emotions that come with the experience.
Yeah, and as you know, everywhere I go, I hear people's stories, and I am incredibly grateful for the fact that folks are vulnerable with me. And you know, I can think of two guys off the top of my head who, at recent events that I was speaking at, approached me. One was, a man who was probably in his 40s who whispered to me, you know, I know I lost a sibling to abortion. And he said, thank you for talking about how it impacts everyone. And then at another event, a man who was right a legislator, right, in state government, had spoken with me after an event, and he said, that abortion took place decades ago, and I have never been the same. He said, I was never given any choice. And that's not the first time I've heard that, and it won't be the last. But I don't know, Kylee, sometimes how to help people understand the amount of suffering that people are sitting with. Because I think sometimes people can look at me or even you because of the role that you're in and go, yeah, well, it makes sense that people tell you about their abortion experience. But how many people are walking around us? What do the numbers look like? I mean, this is not an anomaly that people are finding me and approaching me, or they're calling support after abortion. So what's the number look like?
Well, we have the estimate of 22 million people who would step forward into healing today if it met them where they're at and they knew where to go. And that's our mission at Support After Abortion, is to make it a very clear name and a very clear process that recognizes their needs and places them in the driver's seat of their healing journey. And also, Melissa, notices and recognizes that it's not going to be a one and done experience. You're not going to go to one retreat or go to one 6-week study and boom, done. It's like an onion, right? We're going to unpack things, we're going to experience things. And my favorite experiences with our clients are actually where they come back from an abortion healing experience and say, I actually want to dig into my addiction. I actually want to dig into my abandonment. I'd really like to have a conversation about miscarriage because I feel like my miscarriage was a punishment for my abortion. Wow, like what floodgates are opening and what freedom we must feel when we can finally be wholly who we are without these things that weigh us down. And that grief is so profound that it is carried with us until we are able to face it and talk about it and work through those hard things.
Oh yeah, it permeates people's lives in ways that I think that we can sort of be in denial about, or we just sort of kind of get used to it, right? Even for me, my grief and my trauma, big T's and little T's, all are very unique to me, but at the same time are really not. You and I have talked about this, how the abortion grief is compounded in abortion survivors or in, mothers whose experiences didn't go the way that they planned. But yeah, when you sort of finally slow down and you start to peel the onion, I mean, like it is very freeing, but I think also sometimes people kind of go, oh no. I remember at a retreat once, a woman that we were picking up, an abortion survivor, she was kind of there waiting at the airport, and I got out of the car and she said, "You're Melissa." She said, "I have a love-hate relationship with you and your healing curriculum." And I just went, "Yep, it's you. Get in," right? I know it's you. Because it is a bit after, decades, when you start to peel the onion, you're like, oh, shoot, right? Like there is way more to this. But at the same time, that's exactly what you're talking about, is that's when the greatest freedom and true wholeness and physical, emotional, mental, spiritual healing takes place.
Yeah. And that's when we get into those really awful words like jealousy and anger and feelings that we really don't want to feel. But it's part of the process. And it's just so vital that we talk about what the other side looks like and what it looks like after healing and how much freedom we feel. I recently have been taking a class on the way in which our tissues hold our issues. I love that phrase, and it just reminded me that this is not just a set of emotions. It's not just a thought process. It's a whole body experience, and for that reason, we are dedicating ourselves at Support After Abortion to come up with multiple modalities. There's so many things that we feel that we haven't gotten the words for yet. And I think it's important for us to express our healing journey through art and through music and through nature and religious experiences and secular experiences and sometimes clinical experiences to just help us to get unstuck, right? Because the opposite of stuck is acceptance. And I had that said to me the other day, and I was like, the opposite of stuck is acceptance. Yes, because stuck is a judgment, and accepting stuckness is how we can move forward. So I encourage anyone that's listening to this experience and conversation between me and Melissa to just know that there's freedom, there's joy, there's hope on the other side, and you're worthy of it.
Well, and I love that the opposite of stuck is acceptance. I mean, that needs thrown on a bumper sticker. It probably needs placed on my fridge, um, just as a constant reminder. But I say that to people all the time, right? When I'll say like unwillingness, that's the way I've put it in the past, right? About just different things. Like unwillingness is the greatest obstacle to anything in life. And so that is acceptance right there.
Yeah.
For
I
folks
know
who, what were you going to say, Kylie?
Oh, I was going to share with you that I encountered a gentleman who has experienced multiple levels of healing, and what really stuck with me was how much he would not forgive himself, even though he had been through so many experiences. And as we unpacked that more together, I mean, I'm talking about decades of healing, every level, every type of encounter. And he still, it was almost like he was wearing a hair shirt every day. He still woke up every morning dedicated to beating himself up over the abortion. And what we learned through that encounter was that he was scared of feeling relief. He was scared of feeling joy again because he had judged himself not worthy. And that is something that I think complicates this whole experience of support after abortion, is knowing that you deserve to get to the other side.
And I think that's where I'm going to actually let this conversation stay, because I think that's the most important point to make right now is for folks who have been impacted by abortion, whether, you know, they were the woman, they were the man, they were a family member, a former clinic worker, right? You name it, we can be our greatest obstacles to healing. And it is this fear, right? The fear, and not just the fear of facing feelings and thoughts and all of those things, but sort of that fear of I'm not worthy, right? I deserve to feel what I have felt. I I need to stay in this place, right? I deserve whatever I think the bad has been in my life because of my actions or my inactions, my words or lack of words. And I think sometimes clinically, I have also found folks who kind of go, yeah, I don't necessarily like being miserable. And yes, I'm gonna judge myself, but I also am so afraid because I've sat in this for so long that I don't know what would fill that space, right? If I'm not condemning myself and waking up every day reminding myself of what I have done, I don't know what it would look like, right? I don't know what joy looks like. I don't know what freedom looks like. I know this. And support after abortion wants better for people than that.
We do. We do, because we know the ripple effect of healing. We talk so much in our culture about the way in which broken people create more broken people, but the positive side of that coin is that healed people create more healed people. And so your journey, your experience of healing is going to have a ripple effect on everyone around you. And so if you can't find the yes within yourself to love yourself enough to begin this journey, do it for the people around you. Do it to break the generational trauma. Do it to experience life differently.
Ugh, that is so beautiful. I wholeheartedly agree, which I'm not surprised by. For folks who don't know about support after abortion, let them know where they can find you. Maybe if they are, being impacted right now and they know that they want to reach out immediately, Kylee, how would somebody reach out?
We have an after abortion line, and it is so easy to reach because you can call or text 844-289-HOPE. HOPE is 4673. Or you can email us, help@supportafterabortion.com. If you're really concerned about having this type of information on your phone, you might just want to go into a web chat with us, and we can at least begin the conversation with you, or you can find us on social media and DM us, and we'll be right there. So that finding us on social media is Facebook and Instagram at supportafterabortion.com.
Well, thank you so much for sharing everything that you have today. And, on a selfishly personal level, I just appreciate having you in my life. So thank you for being you, Kylee, and doing what you do. I mean, I've loved getting to see you get involved because you are the absolute right person for what you do.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I really have enjoyed this conversation, and I hope it brings a lot of people to a new place in their journey.
Yeah, and for people to understand there is life beyond abortion and a more abundant life than they probably can imagine for themselves.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Life Beyond Abortion is a podcast presentation of the Herzog Foundation. The views and opinions on the show are those of the host and her guest, and not necessarily those of the Herzog Foundation. You can find out more about Melissa's work at melissaohden.com or by following her on Instagram at melissaohden. Be sure to like and subscribe to the show so that you never miss an episode of Life Beyond Abortion.